Hi, I'm Max Rudin, President and Publisher of Library of America, and welcome to LOA Live. Library of America is a nonprofit organization dedicated to publishing authoritative new editions of great American writers and to keeping the multivocal democratic spirit of our literary tradition a vital part of the culture. Warm thanks to LOA members and to all of you attending tonight for supporting our work and these LOA Live programs. Tonight's program celebrates publication of this book, The Black Fantastic, 20 Afrofuturist Stories, edited by André Carrington, who joins us tonight. Over the next hour, we explore the new wave of science fiction and fantasy by Black writers that's burst onto the American literary scene in recent decades. A creative ferment that includes allied work by filmmakers, artists, and musicians. Building on the literary legacy of Octavia Butler and Samuel Delany and African American storytellers before them, these writers root their visions of other worlds and alternate pasts, presents, and futures in the social and psychological realities of Black history and experience. Their provocative voices are at the vanguard of American fiction. What is Afrofuturism, and where did it come from? Where do these writers take the inspiration for their dark prophecies and wondrous visions? And what do the old gods and fantastic futures they conjure in their stories tell us about the way things are and how they might be? To explore these and other questions, we're very lucky to welcome four distinguished guests. Tananarive Due has been a leading voice in speculative fiction for more than 20 years. Her acclaimed novels and stories include, most recently, the novel The Reformatory, winner of the American Book Award, the Shirley Jackson, Bram Stoker, and World Fantasy Awards, and the LA Times Book Prize. With her mother, civil rights activist Patricia Stevens Due, she wrote Freedom in the Family, a mother-daughter memoir of the fight for civil rights. She is also a film historian with expertise in the Black horror genre. She joins us from Southern California, where she teaches at UCLA. Victor LaValle's work has earned the Shirley Jackson, British Fantasy, Bram Stoker, World Fantasy, and American Book Awards. His 6 novels include The Changeling, adapted in 2023 for Apple TV Plus, and most recently, Lone Women. His story, We Travel the Spaceways, is included in The Black Fantastic. He joins us from his home in the Bronx. Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah's story collection, Friday Black, received the Penn Gene Stein Book Award, and his best-selling novel, Chain Gang All-Stars, was a National Book Award finalist. His story, The Hospital Where, appears in The Black Fantastic, and he also joins us from the Bronx. Our moderator, André Carrington, editor of The Black Fantastic, is Associate Professor of English at the University of California, Riverside, where he directs the Speculative Fiction and Cultures of Science program, and he's the author of Speculative Blackness, The Future of Race in Science Fiction. He joins us from Riverside, California. We welcome your questions and comments and invite you to share your name and where you're tuning in from. The Q&A button is on your menu bar. Now, please welcome Nana Adjei-Brenyah, Tananarive Due, Victor LaValle, and André Carrington. Over to you, André.
Tananarive, you and I think, are people who look at Afrofuturist as a label in a really flexible way. It's kind of it's what Linda Martell says on Beyonce's country album. The genres are a funny thing, that they seem very simple, but some people feel confined by them. And for me, I try to encourage my students, and I try to use terms like Afrofuturism or speculative fiction just to encourage people to think speculative possibilities, things that we don't know are true or not, things that could be true, things that haven't happened yet, the supernatural in the present and in the past, that all of those are really constructive for thinking about. Can you say a little about how horror fits into that for you?
I would love to. Horror often gets forgotten in the Afrofuturism conversation because it is such a strong subgenre all by itself. And my basic definition of horror is that it's an emotion. so that there are several works that could qualify as horror, depending on, the eye of the beholder, which is what all art is, right? But much of it is fantasy, imaginary creatures. If you don't believe in zombies, for example, I know some people do, not trying to step on any toes, but there are a lot of imaginary creatures in horror. And I think the one thing that horror is best at, and what keeps me coming back as both a creator and as a reader and viewer, is human resilience. Afrofuturism as a whole is very much imagination and, past, present, future, all existing in the same moment, planets, societies. But horror really focuses in on that instant in which a character discovers they are up against something bigger than themselves, something they didn't know existed. They didn't even know there was a demon or that there was any such thing as a demon.
Yeah.
And now by the end of the story, either they've learned how to vanquish it or they didn't, but either way, there's a lesson in there about standing up. And I think that's the nutrient that I love the most about horror, because life is scary. Life is especially scary right now. And while the whole of Afrofuturism helps us process and contextualize, like you can remember, well, we're going through a bad moment now, but what about, your great great grandmother and all that kind of thing. But it's horror that makes us confront the beast, whatever the beast is, and find out who we are. Find out who we are. Are we the trip and fall, hide under the covers character? Hopefully not. You have, pick up a weapon, pick up a spell book, stand up.
That's so vital as a nutrient. I love that. It's a vitamin. It's a naturally occurring. Too much will kill you. but you need enough of it. Right. I really dig that. I'm gonna take that. I'm gonna credit you.
Same.
It
same.
occurs, credit where credit's due. It occurs to me when you say that Nana and Victor, both of your stories in this collection, they give us narrators who do encounter something otherworldly, do encounter something beyond what we might assume is natural or rational, but they don't succeed by like fighting it. They deal with it. They go on with it and deal with what it means. And I wonder if that's a pattern that you notice, if it makes telling the story more interesting for you, or if there is something that you want narrators or heroes to maybe confront and maybe get past.
This is such a good question. I'm already taking notes, because what you just said about horror as being about human resilience is a really, really nice frame for me to take in, because there's been times when I've been I think my relationship to the various labels that exist has always been kind of tricky for me, because I mostly learn or consider them after the fact, through criticism. That's been beautiful, but it's also it makes, sometimes I feel as if I'm pretending something, or as if I didn't earn a spot in the space. But in horror is maybe the one I feel that the most about, when people think about some of my work as being in the horror tradition. But when I think about it in that sense of that resilience, I totally, really, really do see that, actually. And to answer you, so I really appreciate that. And I also will be citing you in the future for sure. I appreciate that a lot. And then thinking about how characters deal with it, maybe find creative ways of dealing with this thing that's oppressing them, or trying to crush them, or trying to, make them smaller, whatever it is. I think that a lot of my work is somewhat not bored, but is somewhat, I don't know, tired with the idea that you could just sort of power through things through force of will. And I think especially coming out of America, the idea that just grab a gun, being the answer perpetually feels frustrating to me sometimes. Not to say though that there isn't opportunity for force to be part of the equation, but for it to be the end all be all, I think can be a little bit, for me, feels a little bit reductive. And so I try my best to let my characters sometimes pull towards softness or something. You know, they have a lot of characters who sometimes really strong, and maybe opening themselves up to some kind of softness might be the answer. Sometimes it's just accepting what is could be the answer. There's a lot of different ways of thinking about it, but I don't know. Even just in this first few moments, I'm already thinking about my own work differently. So I'm feeling grateful already for being here.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Victor, do you find what do you find sustains you or really gets you going, really makes you feel like you're doing what you mean to when you have a narrator, you have someone up against something bigger than themselves in your stories?
Well, I was thinking about this as Tananarive and Nana were talking, and thinking about one element that, speaking about my own work, that I am realizing is often there is something that is a part of horror, I think, as a whole, right? Sometimes to a frustrating degree, but I think it speaks to something true, which is that in a lot of horror, somebody might say there's a monster, but most of the time people don't all go, "Oh, you're right. There's a monster. Let's all team up and fight it." And in fact, a lot of the times, part of a horror story is I'm alone in this fight. Do you know what I mean? Or I'm the only one who believes my next door neighbor is a vampire. I'm the only one who believes we're in the middle of a coup. I'm the only one, whatever it might be, is the horror that you're sort of wrestling with or dealing with, Um, but in a way, I think the thing that makes me feel energized is knowing that at least all the horror I love, along with the idea of pushing back against that, is that sense that you do find allies. You do find people who here, it's the little ragtag group of outsider teenagers who
Yeah.
who come together and they fight a monster clown that has been around for 10,000 years, and somehow they win. And that sense that so many times horror is about that sort of teaming up feels very good to me. And then also, even if it's not, even if in the end it is one person against the thing, that what's always in my mind as the writer is the team I have is my reader,
Uh-huh.
the reader who gets on board with this character and who comes to see the world as they see it and understands the fight, whether it's as small as this is only about my life, living or dying, or it's about saving the entire universe. That the reader and the character end up becoming the team, and
Yeah.
that very, very powerful and very, very moving when I fall in love with a story or a book.
Oh, wow. That's really cool. I'm happy to be on the team then.
Yeah.
Glad I'm not on the other side.
Yes, that's it. That's it.
Yo. Um, Nana, could I ask you to read something from your contribution to this collection? Um,
Can and I will.
Wonderful. For folks following along who have the book before them, Nana's story, The Hospital Where. We are starting on, what is it? I had it pulled up just now. Page 187 is where we were going to pick up.
Yeah, and I'm gonna just for real quick, the context is a character who wants to sort of be a writer, and he's come to it through some kind of harshness, and his muse is not like a typical muse. He's this character called this 12-tongue god that's sort of enrolling him in this new life path. And it's funny, I haven't read this in a long time, and I used to read this in a very particular way because the 12-tongue god is supposed to be someone who sounds like everyone all at once. So I'm going to try to do it the way I used to, just so I don't feel like I'm cheating anybody, but it's kind of embarrassing and I haven't done it in a long time. So that's all my little, plea before. We'd been in a house that the bank would soon want back. The nights were dark because the gas and electric company had decided enough was enough. I learned that many of the things I loved, the comforts that made me feel good about myself, could disappear very slowly and also suddenly. I learned to hate then, to hate others for having things, to hate myself for not. Then, one day, like an angel, the 12-tongued god emerged from the midnight black around me, as mysterious and vital as my own breath. I can give you new eyes, Eyes that will work, that won't cry. I can put your hurt to use, 12 Tongue said. I can give you what you want. After every other word, it pulled off a mask to reveal yet another beautiful new face. Its voice sounded like every voice I'd ever heard speaking at once. I can give you the power to be anywhere, to heal the world, to own time, to turn lies to truth, to make day into night and night into day. I nodded viciously. You will have the power to change everything, to make your life what you want. What do I have to do? I asked.
Word. Wow. I was planning to ask how reading it makes you feel, but you disclosed a little beforehand, actually, that that there's a bit of embarrassment in trying to take on that voice because it's intimidating. It's intimidating, and it's kind of like it's overwhelming to hear it. And so it must be overwhelming to try to bring that voice to the page.
Yeah. And I don't know why. I mean, I think I'm just a ridiculous person, so I just make
Sure.
things harder than it has to
Sure.
be, number one. But I think it's interesting because when that story does have this entity that seems like it's like almost like the kind of horror story where like a genie comes, but it's one of those
Mhm.
like fucked up, I'm sorry, excuse me, like bad genies that it's like that kind of thing. And it really was a lot about my relationship to writing and how I came to it from like sort of this harsher place.
Mm.
And I think it had to feel really overwhelming and a lot. It had to feel like big. And when I was, it also felt like to me, that story, even though it's surreal and speculative and Afrofuturist, it's the most real story in the book. It's almost like a memoir-ish to me. And that's part of why it feels like it's a challenge. So I'm glad you having me do that. I haven't done that in a while. It's a little rusty. I used to be like more, but anyway, sorry.
No, word. I am grateful
Amazing voice.
to
Great.
help practice it too. It gives me a little bit of Octavia Butler's story, The Book of Martha, where an author encounters God in a dream, and God is going to give her, the ability to change the world. But that's to be yourself in the face of that is what's really challenging to really confront. What do you want to do? That is an
Yeah.
enormous ask.
It's the only story from my first book that I think will get like a sequel in my next book. And I think
Oh,
because that was like very at the very beginning of the whole author thing. And now I'm still in the beginning relatively, but I'm a little more in and I have more feelings.
oh, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Um, Victor, could I ask you to read from We Travel the Spaceways?
Sure. I'm happy to read. And I guess I will give a little context as well,
Thank you.
without spoiling anything for anybody. I guess the narrator of the story is a man who's living on the street who would be categorized as perhaps schizophrenic or having visions, things like that, whose nickname is Grimace because he wears a purple coat and he's very big. And that's the only name he has. And he's living on the street. He believes his soda cans that he carries with him, are speaking to him and giving him messages, telling him things that he should do. And he believes those messages are coming from, for lack of better terms, the ancestors who are floating in another galaxy, uh, a million light years away. And so one of the questions in the story is he actually getting communication from these from his ancestors who are already traveling the spaceways, or is he delusional? And in this little bit I'll read, he believes he makes a trip to where the ancestors are in their space city.
Word. This is on page 335 if people have the book and want to look at the text.
UI Scuti sits in the Scutum constellation. Scutum is Latin for shield. We're farther away from it now, I said. I stood at the viewing station, but I wasn't alone. Behind me, beside me, there were others, but I couldn't turn away from the sight of the star. I had the impression the others wouldn't let me turn either, as if I wasn't prepared to see them yet. But if not now, when? It's collapsing. When it becomes a supernova, we'll recharge the cells. Cells in your bodies? I asked. No, in our vessel. The viewing station appeared to me like a soap bubble tethered by a walkway that seemed as fine as fishing line. We were inside the bubble, at a distance from a ship, or no, something too massive to be described as a ship. The bubble extended and floated at a distance so our readings would not be disturbed by the vessel's frequencies. I want to see it collapse, I said. I want to stay. Let me stay, I begged. You aren't even here yet, signalman. This isn't a trip your body can make on its own. But I'm alone, I said.
Oh, thank you for that. Um, so so when I revisit that now and when I read it the first time, I thought, um, at first I realized like, oh, this is a little more complicated than, oh, is this man crazy or is he not? It's
Mhm.
not, it's not like that. It's not the question. It's really like, what is he seeing that I'm not seeing? What is he
Right.
getting that I'm not getting? And
Right.
that sense of being alone is really profound. Um, what what strikes you when you revisit this now? Um, does that hold true? Do you still expect the question of is he crazy, is he not? Or do you come to it differently now?
Well, in a lot of ways, so maybe to speak as vaguely as I can, I come from a family with a fair bit of neurodivergence, what used to be called mental illness, yeah. And one of the things that I came to understand was like right from the outside, a number of my family members to a stranger would seem like somebody who was frightening, disturbing, off-putting, all that kind of stuff. Um, but what I knew was that in a way, because I knew them and I understood maybe sometimes like what they were saying that were snatches of much larger conversations and or were them having conversations with voices that no one else could hear. I understood on some level that the thing that made them seem, for lack of better terms, crazy to people, right, was that they were they were living in a reality that nobody else had agreed to live in,
Yeah.
right? And so a lot of the times I started to think like, well, if almost any of us, if we go to another place where not everybody agrees with how we think culture works, how we think uh, gender works, masculinity works, whatever we think of as a fixed thing, it just isn't, you know. And so so now when I like come back to this story and think about it, I lean more into that idea that like if you were, for almost any of us, if you could somehow like sort of learn the secret language
Mm,
a of a person who seems to like they don't make sense, there's a decent chance that they're just living a certain reality. And then the fun question is, are they actually right, and the rest of us are the one living in a delusion? And I kind of like that. And in the case of this story, I kind of wanted for the two main characters are people who overall society generally never is very good to.
yeah.
And once again, in this moment, particularly, at least one of them, this country is particularly not good to. Um, and I like the idea that actually they were right.
Yeah. Yeah, I see that, and it's so I think it's so telling that when we open ourselves up to, when we walk into a door labeled speculative fiction or Afrofuturism or what have you, we allow ourselves to acknowledge maybe there's other intelligence, maybe there's a bigger reality that
Mm.
I need to listen to find out about that I can't put off the table. I have to put it on the table. And I love being present for that. Um, yeah, thank you for offering it. I wanted to ask you each one other thing before getting to some questions in the chat, but it's connected to something that you just pointed out, Victor, and it's that so there are in this collection there are stories with some unlikely heroes and some tricksters. I think that's true for Violet Allen's story, for Justina Ireland's story in this collection, for Alex Smith's story in this collection. And there are also stories where I think like yours, Victor, and Nana, yours as well, where the narrators, we have something to learn from them. We can relate to them, but they're not heroes. They're not prophets, but they do, they know things. And I wonder if, like Victor says, this comes in part from, just relating to people around you who experience the world differently. Do you bring that sense that it's useful for fiction, that it's useful for kind of expanding how we think about the world? How do we do that in our actual life right now today? Like when we are facing unlikely or maybe too likely situations that are very undesirable and some futures that we would rather not have to deal with, who do we listen to? Where do we look?
This is such a good question. And before I try to give my answer, I just want to like mention again, like the story Victor just read and with this intentionality, I think that's just such an important thing. And it's a really clear example of how like stories can do the really important job of creating space and reminding us that things don't have to be exactly the way they are. I also have a lot of serious mental health conditions in my family. That's like sort of life defining for me. And that idea of just taking someone serious, that compassion, that willingness to look, because mostly our primary response is not looking, or if we do look, it's like carceral to those with like serious mental, I'm talking like, especially if you get into like sort of schizophrenia or those type of issues, which again is like sort of big in my family. I think just that story existing and someone getting a chance to read that does something really important, because again, it's asking someone to just imagine a little bit differently, imagine a little bit off of what you already are doing. And I think that's really important. And so in terms of what can we do, I mean, in the context, the word is obviously horrifying and in all these different ways, because of like politically, but also just there's just so much horrors. But I've been thinking a lot about where does like hope sort of come from, and maybe more important than hope, like faith. Like where do you get it from? How do you like mine it? And I've been I've been thinking a lot about this study. There's a professor named Ellen, I think Langer. She's out of Harvard. She does psychology studies. She's famous for this counterclockwise study in which a bunch of men in like their 80s stayed together in this space. They retrofitted the house to make it seem much like it was much younger, like much further in the past. Like say they did this in the 2000s, they made it seem like it was in the 60s. They had them use language they had used before. And in like a very short amount of time, an insanely short amount of time, a lot of these people like physically changed. They got younger. They moved differently. They looked visibly differently. She does a lot of work with how thoughts affect your like outcomes and like placebo, or what she calls nocebo effect. There's another version of a study where she had 2 sets of housekeepers. I'm going to try to keep this quick. And it's this 84 of them, 42 of them were told, oh, the work of being of that you're doing, cleaning these houses and keeping everything tidy is exercise. That's physical exercise, and you're gonna get benefits from it. Then the other 2, like sort of the control group, they said this is not exercise, but they were doing the exact same work. The group that did do that was told that this is exercise, they lost weight, their waists got smaller, they got stronger because they believed it. So I guess what I'm saying is that where do we look? I don't know altogether, but wherever look to places that help steel your like sort of inner faith, and know that faith kind of can serve itself if you allow it to blossom and grow. It can help in like an actual, really real way. And I like to use that example because it's like, for me, it reminds me that believing in what I believe is possible makes it more possible. And so when I believe that it comes from, I can be in this space where I know people are doing that important work. Like I say, even hearing Victor talk about that, I actually feel kind of moved in this moment, because it's a very important thing that people don't talk about enough. And that helps me feel more steeled with the thing I'm going to try to do next. And think, you know what, I don't know what all we can do about this and that, but I do know maybe for sure that we can change the general perception of those with serious mental health problems, because I've already seen someone try, and I've seen it even open my heart a little bit. And then so those things are huge for me. And I've been resting on those a lot right now. I'm sorry, because I've been thinking about this like right now. So, but anyways, that's something for me.
Thank you. Victor, did you want to follow up on that, or let Nana drop the mic on it?
I'm sorry.
I feel like that's, I mean, that study sounds amazing, and I feel like I need to look it up. And
Her
I
book
just,
is called The Mindful Body. Her last name is Langer, Langer. This is real for everybody in the chat or whatever, just so you know, I'm not just making this up.
I love
Where,
this question. Oh,
yeah, Tananarive, where do you look? Do you think that by reading fantasy, by using our imagination, by reading science fiction, do we plan for the future by doing these things? Or, you know, I hope so. I hope we can.
you know,
How do
yeah,
you
it's
find that?
it's interesting. I think I want to tie it, and I hope it's okay to jump out of order. There's a question
I
that
don't know.
has to do in chat with whether Afrofuturism is a form of Sankofa, right?
Mhm.
Looking back toward the past in order to carve a path to the future. And
Yeah.
that is very, very much an aspect of Afrofuturism. And all of us will find hope in different places. You know, during COVID in 2020, a lot of people found hope in Parable of the Sower, which is a very grim book, but it has a nugget of hope in the Earthseed parables, one of which literally got me through the 2016 election. The only
Yeah.
lasting truth is change. That was the only way I could make sense of it, was to remember the only lasting truth is change. And if that's
Yeah.
helpful to anyone in 2025, take that and run with it. But it won't just be writing or engaging with works that are cautionary tales and warnings about where we're headed. Some people, I think, are fed also by visions of what we want to build. You know, there's always conflict and issues. I don't think there's any true utopian storytelling. I mean, I don't know. At least I don't engage with utopian storytelling. I haven't yet. If someone can point something out in chat that is like a beautiful utopian story that gets them through, let me know. But that undoing that knot of conflict, that
Yeah.
knot of what's the issue and how do we solve it, for me, more and more, I am finding it is in history, and more specifically in Black American history. My novel, The Reformatory, was set in 1950. I'm writing a novel now, which begins in the 1920s. And I am in awe of what my ancestors did, of the art and the joy they created, the families they kept together, the children they helped feed when they had nothing.
Yeah.
And that gives me a lot of strength. So yes, we are facing, in this way at least, a form of unprecedented times. You know, I mean, there are aspects of our times now that are definitely unprecedented, but there are other aspects that are just the same, like Tuesday. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
Tuesday
Yeah.
from my great grandmother is what we're
Yeah.
facing. So that gives me a lot of strength that we can create beauty that's lasting in the same way I'm still appreciating music that they were creating in the 20s and 30s and 40s. As writers, you don't know whose shelves your work ends up on and how it moves and inspires them. But I had one reader write me years ago and tell me she could stand up to a home intruder. That's my biggest nightmare, a home intruder,
Oh,
because she
yeah.
remembered the resilience of one of my characters. And that is super meaningful to me. And I hope I can remember that if I'm ever in that situation.
Hey, I hope so too. But word. Wow, thank you for getting to something that a person in the chat had pointed to. That came from Lillian S from Hagerstown, Maryland. What's up, Maryland? Because I'm from Maryland, I was born in Baltimore, grew up in Silver Spring. I'm gonna also take the next question that came from Maryland, that came from Stephanie Henderson in Dundalk. That was, I'm sorry, see, look at me. I'm displacing my Marylands. That previous question came from Stephanie Henderson in Dundalk. This next question comes from Lillian S in Hagerstown. And this one actually I think is very good for all of us, which is what books or works have you been exposed to that change the way you think about science fiction, fantasy storytelling?
Well, one that comes to mind is just because I'm looking at it in my office, from being just a kid of the 80s who just loved comic books. That was in many ways, my way into literacy was comic books. But Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, I don't know if people have read that one before, but it's basically Swamp Thing was this really generally speaking, kind of cheeseball character who looked like a giant tree man, and he would like fight goofy supervillains, right? And then in the 80s, this British writer, Alan Moore, who is famous for other comics like V for Vendetta and Watchmen, a couple other things, he turned that comic into this really like thoughtful, introspective, essentially like almost like spiritual climate change comic book, you know? And it became all about how this character, Swamp Thing, is actually tied into what they called in that comic book the green, you know, and that he was in essence battling with the ways that the ways of human beings were destroying the green, and that he would have to in various ways sort of deal with that. But for me as a kid, the reason it's like one of the first things I thought of is because for me as a kid, I think there was a way, I don't know consciously or not, I did have this sense that, you know, people often say like comic books are stupid and they're just like simplistic art. You know what I mean? You just read about some people beating other people up, that kind of thing. But Alan Moore and Swamp Thing was the first time where I saw this thing that like the thing I was thinking about at the time was very much was it was the Cold War, and it was about nuclear bombs dropping and all the rest. The Day After Tomorrow and all these kind of shows that were on TV, and this comic book that in theory was aimed at teenagers, you know, was taking me seriously enough to talk through these kinds of ideas. Um, and to say like you deserve to you deserve to discuss and think about these ideas just as seriously as anybody else. And I think that was the beginning of me realizing that like a medium that entertains can also be a medium that challenges and makes you think, you know, and those things don't have to be exclusive.
Oh, that's really great. I'm glad that you found that out so that you could contribute to it.
Yeah.
Nana, is there something that affected you that way that changed how you thought about this kind of storytelling?
Oh, for sure. Mumbo Jumbo. My agent got me a
Ah,
copy of a first edition. I have one over there. If you want to see it, I have like a first edition of Mumbo Jumbo. I'm gonna grab it one second. And then,
Rub it like a genie's lamp.
you know, it just like releases something.
but there's something cool about it though. It's so irreverent. If people don't know, Ishmael Reed's Mumbo Jumbo. On the back, in terms of it, what it taught me is that there's no rules, and
Yeah.
you could talk about serious things while having fun, and also being like kind of like, I mean, just bold. On the back of it, one of my favorite things about this copy though is the where you would put the blurbs. He writes propaganda dash the New York Times. Cute sophomoric Julius Lester. Cute Lindsay Patterson, the writer. This is Ishmael Reed is living proof that the bacteria of the pop culture has entered the literary world. Shane Stevens. Such this was my favorite one. Such gratuitous viciousness is not called for. L.E. Sisman of the New Yorker.
These are the
Isn't
quotes
that
on the book.
amazing? These are on the book.
I like that.
Blurbs.
I love that.
Isn't that incredible?
Hysterical.
I love it. I'd let your haters be your motivators. No.
Anyway, sorry.
No, that's great. Tananarive, was there something that kind of made you think differently about science fiction fantasy?
I'll try to keep this brief, but though I started writing stories about Black magical children, by the time I got through high school, college, and grad school, I had written myself out of both genre and race, so and gender. I was writing epiphany stories about white male characters because that's what a story felt like by the time I got out of grad school. And even though it's gentle in its magical realism, it's not way out there, but it was Mama Day, Gloria Naylor, that really, I was like, oh shoot, this is a Black woman writing about Black experience that I can relate to, and there's magical realism. And it helped me realize the degree to which I had shut down the part of myself that I always knew that was what I wanted to be. I wanted to be writing Black characters having fantastic experiences.
Yeah, that's really that keeping that part alive. It's so vital. It's really it does wonders. It really makes us, able to do the stuff we don't know, we don't think we can do. I am very glad to see that. I did want to get to something else from the chat, but I also saw a couple of other contributors are among the attendees. Tara Campbell, author of
Yeah.
The Orb, and Jennifer Brissett, author of A Song for You. The Orb is one that, along with Matt Parr, the editor at Library of America, as we read it and considered what to include in the collection, it was one that really did something that I think is such a valuable model for what writers are doing now, which is messing with the realistic and unrealistic, the genre questions, the horrifying, the intense, the grotesque, but also there's just like confronting sexual harassment in there, which is like any story about a cult that doesn't have sexual harassment in it doesn't seem complete. And that story, it has it, and also it's weird as hell. It is really wonderful. So thanks to Tara Campbell for that. And Jennifer Brissett, I just taught A Song for You in my science fiction class at UC Riverside. And I advise the students that it really reminds me of The Ship Who Sang by Anne McCaffrey. And I kept I kept asking them to convince me that A Song for You is not an allegory, is not an allusion to Orpheus and Eurydice, and they couldn't do it. They couldn't do it. It's on really some next level mythology, and it really does that with an android and space and other planets. And I love that that breadth is in what people are writing today. I love that Black folks do all of these things. So I'm glad y'all are here. Uh, in the chat, there's a question from Jacob DeBrock. And it's a fun one. Do you think that Black Panther helped bring Afrofuturism into the mainstream? And more so along those lines, do you think that there are connections between literary Afrofuturism, between writing in the publishing world and the other world or the adjacent world of movies and, big intellectual property?
It's, I do sometimes wonder, like, say in the case of Black Panther, like I totally see the argument for, like, did that bring these ideas to the mainstream? But there's another part of me that likes to think about the idea that a thing has been bubbling
Mm,
in the culture, like kind of at the edges, and that on a certain level, it takes 20, 30, 40 years of people sort of turning that on, like like raising the temperature of the fire so that it can reach that point, right? Like, so rather than it sort of like magically appearing, like acknowledging the ways that it is all these folks, all this hard work that people are doing at these edges, that is like slowly but sure, so that you get even like the idea of like Ta-Nehisi Coates writing Black Panther, right, needs to come from Christopher Priest writing Black Panther before that, and on and on and on. And then within the movies, I mean, I really don't mean this that facetiously, but I feel like you also have to give a little credit to, like, even to Action Jackson in the 80s, to Meteor Man in the 90s. I mean,
Yeah.
like, none of these things became the big thing, but they're all part of like that us slowly getting to that point where even like a Ryan Coogler, who, like, there's a version of his story where he makes Fruitvale Station and he becomes a really thoughtful, realist
yeah.
director who's doing this kind of, but that by that point, it was possible for comic book culture to be speaking in a way to the realities of the world and to these commercial sort of like all the stuff bubbling up, that they work together, Anyway, so that's all to say, I feel like Black Panther is almost like the great grandkid
Uh-huh.
who finally like uh who made it to the top,
Yeah.
and as opposed to just the kid who just appeared out of nowhere and was the one, if that makes sense.
It's that's such a good analogy. It's such a tricky idea because, and actually love Ryan Coogler. I think he's one of the coolest people ever. I love what he's doing. And from Fruitvale Station till now, I actually think he's super impressive. Same thing with Michael B. Jordan. Same thing with everybody involved. That said, it's like that kid made it and then decided to work for Disney and was like a mega billionaire and kind of left that. Like, I think it's a weird thing that if you Google Black Panther right now, you get like a Disney corporation entity as like
Yeah.
a first image. You know, I think that's tricky. I also know I also know that, you know, Stanley and Jack Kirby were influenced by something. And so
Yeah.
they were trying to like speak towards something. It's just it's tricky. I guess for me, I the mainstream is interesting because but to be included in the mainstream, you so often have to sort of um be you have to sort of submit to this sort of these institutions that are very rarely, if ever, going to present ideas in a really radical or challenging way. And so it's a little bit, I mean, in some ways, yes, but then also, I guess technically, yes, it did
Yeah.
help bring some ideas to the mainstream, but then that mainstream is often like sort of like means so much dilution, so much gets diluted. Like, is it even worth it anymore? I say that with liking that film, and after my dad died, I cried watching the first one on an airplane again because whatever, African dad dead, whatever. I don't know. I'm just saying
Sure.
it's complicated.
Is. Yeah, it 100% is. Yeah, yeah. That the mainstream. Where is it? I don't know. A question that I wanted to get to before we conclude is really about the future. And you know, something that I hope doesn't deter people from reading and thinking about the collection is that Afrofuturism, one of the reasons I always feel comfortable using it, even when we're talking about, you know, alternate history in the past, is that it is in part about just a different relationship to time and history. Afrofuturist artist and activist Rashida Phillips just published a book called Dismantling the Master's Clock. She's a sometime collaborator with Alex Smith, whose story Last Flight of the Unicorn Girl is in this collection from Philadelphia. Shout out Philly Afrofuturism. But what Rashida Phillips and Black Quantum Futurism and More Mother do in their work is really make use of the way that Black people, that different African communities of origin that we come from, conceive of time differently and don't necessarily use the same notions of causality and historicity to negotiate the present, to imagine the future. And that really resonates for me. It makes Afrofuturism it kind of puts an asterisk on the future part and makes it more useful in my mind. So I want to ask you all, what's in your future? What are you up to next? What are you about to do?
Oh, well, I'm very excited. I'll jump right in. I just had my very first meeting to hire crew as a first-time director. So as of a short
Oh,
film,
sweet.
short film. But Steve and I got financing. It hasn't really been announced, so I guess I better not announce it here. But it's an adaptation
Don't tell them.
of something we wrote of a graphic novel we wrote together. So if you know what that is, it's a short film adaptation of that. And very, very excited to find a new way to communicate storytelling.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Victor, what is next for you?
Well, I guess it's to your point about the past and the present and the future all melding together. I'm going to say what I just finished, which is last week we finished the last sound mix on the last episode of the TV show that I am putting out in September. It's an adaptation of one of my novels called The Devil in Silver. It'll be on AMC, part of their terror anthology series. I wrote it, show ran it, and really like all in on this thing. And we have it, and I really do. I mean, I'm biased, but I really think we made an amazing story. It'll be 6 episodes and it's done. It'll be out in late August or early September and then run weekly on AMC until the spooky season. And I'm really proud of it. And so I'm just very excited for that to come out.
Oh, wonderful.
Oh, that's so dope. Did I tell you the weird way that I've seen some of that script? Because I have a friend who was like, did I tell you about this yet?
Oh no.
Anyway, I'll tell you later on. But I got to see a
Okay.
little bit because I helped someone do self tapes. One of my good
Oh,
friends is an actor. Yeah, and
did he made a
uh,
self-tape for it? You tell me, you'll have to tell me
I'll
another
tell you
time.
later.
Yeah.
But I read the script and I read at least the sides, and they were amazing. So really, that's really cool. Um, it's funny. Everyone's talking about screen stuff, and that's like the thing I'm working on most at the moment as well. I'm working at which is also why that's why when I say all that stuff I was saying about Black Panther, it's more like a warning for myself than like an indictment of them or anybody. Um because of the nature of my last book, it could just be so bad and so wrong if you do it wrong. I'm working on the pilot episode for that right now, and I'm
Very
pretty
nice.
much almost at the end of it. And they actually, like, I think right before here, they sent me like I got an email that, like at least the first phase, which means nothing in Hollywoodland, is going to happen. So they're actually, but they're officially optioning it. And so we're going to try from here. So we'll see what happens.
Good luck. Keep that
Fingers crossed.
flashlight on the road, because if you go up a few degrees, man.
Ooh,
I know. I know.
well,
Fingers crossed.
good luck on screen, everybody. Next for me is I got to finish and revise this manuscript for a book about radio adaptations of Black speculative texts that's called Futurism.
Oh,
It should be out end of this year or next, depending on how peer review goes and
you're on
how
fire this
I
year.
work on
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
I'm saying it's now.
And
That
when
sounds great.
what's the time period of the programs that you're writing about?
From the World War II up to a couple years ago.
Oh wow. Okay.
What? Okay, I need this book
Yes,
because
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
did
we
not know
will.
that we had Black radio adaptations of
We sure do.
yeah, in the 40s.
Yeah.
I need this in my
Yes.
vein.
It's
Well,
really impressive.
congratulations to everyone. It sounds like amazing work coming. And that was a great hour. That was really, I'm so grateful to you for that.
Thank you.
Really terrific conversation. And uh, you've been listening to Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah, André Carrington, Tananarive Due, and Victor LaValle talk about the Black Fantastic, 20 Afrofuturist Stories, and Afrofuturism. The book is edited by André Carrington and published by Library of America. I hope you'll join us on Tuesday, March 11, as LOA Live continues the 2025 season with a conversation about Hannah Arendt's The Origins of Totalitarianism, inspired by Library of America's forthcoming new edition with recovered chapters and other writings that trace the development of her thought on authoritarian regimes, a subject with renewed relevance in the current global political landscape. We'll welcome David Bromwich, Selah Habib from Columbia Law School, and volume editor Thomas Wild from the Hannah Arendt Center at Bard College. I want to also mention that registration is also now open for our online course beginning in March, The Heart of American Poetry, taught by renowned poet, teacher, and best-selling author Edward Hirsch. Don't miss this opportunity to learn from a profoundly insightful master poet and teacher. Details and links to register for LOA programs can be found on our website, loa.org/events, where you'll also find information about all the Library of America volumes mentioned tonight and links to purchase those and other volumes of great American writing. LOA Live is made possible with support from Library of America members and viewers. We're grateful to everyone here tonight for joining us. LOA members receive special discounts, including free admission to programs like this one, invitations to exclusive events, and other benefits, while supporting Library of America's nonprofit mission. You can learn more at loa.org/membership. Thanks again so much to our really terrific panel tonight. And everyone have a great evening.